The throne room of the Kargoth Empire was built to show strength. Dark steel walls rose high like cliffs, carved with scars of old battles. Fires burned in giant braziers, their smoke curling into the air, filling the space with the heavy smell of ash. At the far end, upon a throne made from the bones of ancient beasts, sat Princess Velara. She was young, tall, and proud, but her golden eyes were clouded with a sorrow she could not hide. To outsiders, she looked like the perfect heir, sharp tusks, strong shoulders, a warrior's spirit. But every whisper in the empire said the same cruel truth. She was infertile. Among the Kargoth, this was not a small weakness. It was everything. To be fertile meant to pass on the strength of the clan, to continue the bloodline of warriors. To be infertile meant the blood would end with you. No matter how skilled with a blade or how sharp with strategy, no leader without heirs could be trusted to rule. Her rivals knew this. Her generals knew this. Even the common soldiers in the streets whispered about it. The princess who could not give the empire a future. The empire's crown without a jewel. Velara sat stiff in her throne as her war council argued below. "The humans resist us," growled General Krax, slamming his armored fist on the table. His voice was deep, like stones grinding together. "They are weak, but they dare to stand against the empire. We must crush them quickly before they infect other worlds with their arrogance." "They are not even worth the effort of a full fleet," another commander sneered. "Burn their planet, enslave the survivors, and be done with it." Velara listened in silence. She should have spoken. She was the princess, after all. But her mind was heavy. Every word she tried to form died in her throat, as if her rivals were already waiting to twist them into mockery. Finally, she raised her hand, silencing the noise. "The humans fight stubbornly," she said, her voice calm, but carrying an edge. "If they are as weak as you claim, then why have we not taken their world already?" The room went quiet. It was a dangerous question, one the generals did not want to answer, because it was true. The humans were small in number compared to the Empire. Their weapons were crude compared to the Kargoth's plasma cannons and starships. Yet somehow, every time the Empire struck, the humans slipped away. They rebuilt. They returned. They refused to bow. "They hide behind tricks and cunning," General Krax spat. "That is all. They cannot face us in open battle." Velara leaned back in her throne. She wanted to believe that. But deep inside, she wondered if there was something more. Later, when the council was dismissed, Velara walked alone through the grand halls of the palace. Her footsteps echoed against the stone. Guards bowed as she passed, but their eyes told her what they did not say. Respect, yes, but pity as well. Always pity. She hated it. She hated the whispers, the sideways glances, the silent question in everyone's eyes. How can she rule if she cannot create life? She entered her private chamber and let the mask fall. Alone, she was not the proud princess. She was only a woman who felt broken. She stared into the mirror at her sharp features and warrior's body and felt emptiness. What good was strength if the Empire still saw her as less than whole? Her thoughts drifted to the humans. She had seen them only in reports, images captured, during battles in the words of her generals. Yet there was something strange about them. They were not mighty like the Kargoth, nor long-lived like the other empires, but they endured. Even wounded, even cornered, they kept fighting. Velara could not understand it. Her people were strong because they were born strong. Humans were weak, yet still survived. There was a mystery in them, and mysteries drew her. That night, she sat by the balcony staring at the stars. Somewhere out there, the humans were still fighting against impossible odds. She imagined their leaders, small figures standing before vast armies refusing to surrender. A quiet ache stirred in her chest. Was it envy? Or was it hope? But she crushed the thought. Hope was dangerous. She had learned not to trust it. Every time she hoped the healers would find a cure, they shook their heads. Every time she hoped her rivals would forget her weakness, they whispered louder. Hope was a lie, and yet as she stared at the stars, she felt it burning inside her again. The next morning, the Empire sent her to negotiate with the humans. It was not because the Council trusted her. It was because they wanted to test her. Let her fail, they thought, and her claim to leadership would shatter. When she arrived at the human outpost on the moon of Atlas, she expected fear. She expected trembling voices and bowed heads. Instead, she found stubborn eyes staring back at her. At the center of the human delegation stood Captain Elias Ward, a man with silver hair at his temples and lines of battle weariness on his face. He was not young, not powerful, not what the Kargoth would ever call impressive. But when he looked at her, there was no fear, only defiance. "Princess Velara," he said, his voice steady. "We will not kneel." The words hit her harder than any blade. For the first time in years, she felt something stir within her heart, something she had long thought lost. Not anger, not pity, but curiosity. Could these fragile creatures truly hold the answer to the emptiness inside her? The moon of Atlas was small, dusty and gray, but it had become a fortress. The humans had carved bunkers into the rock and raised towers armed, with weapons that looked almost primitive compared to the sleek cannons of the Kargoth. To Princess Velara, it looked like a nest of insects clinging to survival. And yet, those insects had not been crushed. She stepped into the human council chamber, her armored boots echoing against the stone floor. Kargoth guards followed behind her, their heavy bodies taking up half the space. The humans stood firm, their shoulders squared, though their eyes betrayed exhaustion. At the front stood Captain Elias Ward. He was not dressed in shining armor or covered in medals. His uniform was worn, patched in places, but his posture was unbroken. His gray eyes studied Velara with a mixture of caution and challenge. He did not bow. He did not lower his gaze. "Princess Velara," he greeted. His voice was deep but calm, as if he were speaking to an equal rather than a conqueror. Velara narrowed her golden eyes. Most species trembled before the Kargoth. Even other great empires treated them with careful respect. But this human, this small and fragile creature, dared to look at her as if she were only a woman, not the heir to the galaxy's most feared warriors. "You stand on land that belongs to the Kargoth Empire," she said coldly. "Yet you refuse to surrender." "Why?" Elias did not flinch. "Because it is our home. Because surrender means death. And because even if you break our bodies, you will not break our will." The words were simple, but they struck Velara with unexpected force. Her generals had called humans weak, unworthy of notice. But there was no weakness in this man's tone. There was something else, something she had never heard in the voices of her own people. Hope. One of her guards stepped forward, bearing his tusks. "Show respect, human, you speak to the blood of emperors." But Velara raised her hand. "Enough." The guard fell silent. Her gaze remained locked on Elias. "Hope will not save you. Strength decides who survives." Elias's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Strength is not always muscle, princess. Sometimes it is the choice to stand when everything tells you to fall." The room went still. For a moment, Velara did not know what to say. The words reminded her of nights alone, staring at the stars, refusing to let despair consume her completely. She had never admitted it, but perhaps she too had been standing when she should have fallen. The meeting continued with talk of borders, demands and threats, but Velara's thoughts kept circling back to the human captain. His people were outmatched, his weapons were outclassed, and still he faced her with steady eyes. When the council ended, Velara walked the narrow halls of the human base. The air smelled of oil, metal, and recycled air. Children peeked from behind doors, their faces thin but curious. Soldiers nodded to Elias as he passed, and though they looked tired, they carried themselves with quiet pride. "This base should have fallen long ago," Velara muttered. Elias walked beside her, hands behind his back. We have fallen before, many times, but we always rise again. That is humanity's gift. Gift? She asked, almost mocking. To stumble and fall? To endure, he corrected. When storms come, trees break, but grass bends and survives. The simplicity of the image unsettled her. Her people believed strength was unbending, unyielding, yet here was a different kind of strength, one born not of breaking enemies but of refusing to stay broken. Later, in the quiet of her quarters aboard her flagship, Velara thought of Elias's words. She tried to imagine her people bending instead of breaking. The image was almost laughable. The Kargoth were born for war, shaped by fire and steel. And yet, had their endless strength brought them peace? No, it had brought them endless bloodshed. Her hand curled into a fist. She hated that the humans' words lingered in her mind. She hated that she could not dismiss them as weakness. The next day, a message arrived from her rival, Lord Draxin, a powerful warlord who had long hungered for her throne. His words were venom dressed as courtesy. Princess, the message said, the humans are insects. Do not waste your time. Crush them or step aside for one who will. Beneath the words lay the unspoken insult. You cannot give life. You cannot. Please step aside. Velara's tusks clenched. She wanted to destroy the message, but instead Princess Velara had expected the humans to be fragile. She had expected them to break under pressure. Yet every encounter, every conversation, every glance from Captain Elias Ward reminded her that she had been wrong. Their strength was not in muscle or armor. It was in something else, something deeper. That morning she walked among the humans in their training yard. Soldiers ran drills with crude rifles and handmade shields. Their movements were rough and unpolished, but precise. They fell, stumbled, and got up again. Every time a soldier faltered, a comrade was there to help. Velara's golden eyes followed, a young recruit who had tripped and fallen in the dust. The boy's knees were scraped and bleeding, yet he stood and kept running. No one shouted at him. No one mocked him. They encouraged him. In the Kargoth Empire, a mistake like that could mean death. In human ranks, it was only a step toward learning, toward surviving. She felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. Humans were fragile, yes, but they endured. Where the Kargoth measured life by conquest and bloodline, humans measured it by the courage to continue even when the world was against them. Elias appeared beside her without a sound. They are stubborn, he said quietly, watching the soldiers. Some call it foolish, I call it hope. Velara did not respond at once. She thought of her own life, of the Empire's whispers about her infertility. She had been trained to believe that without children, she was incomplete. Without heirs, her victories, her strategies, even her courage, none of it mattered. Hope is fragile, she said at last, her voice low. It can be crushed like these children's bodies. Elias smiled, a small, patient smile. Perhaps. But fragile things can survive more than the strongest walls, more than the sharpest claws. It is the stubbornness of life that endures. Velara looked away, staring at the dusty horizon of Atlas. Humans had survived wars, disease, famine. They were young, weak, and short-lived compared to her people. And yet here they stood, unbroken. The lesson gnawed at her. If humans could endure with so little, perhaps the Kargoth had been looking at strength all wrong. Her thoughts were interrupted by a commotion near the edge of the training yard. A group of human soldiers was rushing to a small transport that had been damaged during the night. Without hesitation, they began repairing it with makeshift tools. Velara stepped closer. One soldier, a woman with short hair and dark eyes, noticed her and froze. She lowered her head. Princess Velara, she said nervously. Do not be afraid, Velara replied. You are strong even in this dust, even in these broken machines. The soldier blinked, surprised. Humans were not accustomed to praise from alien royalty, especially not from someone as feared as a Kargoth princess. Elias spoke from behind her. Strength does not always come from power, he said. It comes from persistence, from the courage to keep going. Velara studied the humans as they worked. One by one, they lifted beams, hammered plates, and tightened bolts. None complained. None gave up. Each motion was small, yet together they kept the transport alive. She felt a pang in her chest. She had been taught that worth was measured by what you could produce, by what you could create. She had been taught that her infertility made her weak, her existence incomplete. And yet, these humans had nothing to produce, nothing to inherit, and they were far stronger than she had imagined. For the first time, Velara questioned everything she had believed about life and legacy. Perhaps worth was not measured by blood or heirs. Perhaps it was measured by courage, by determination, by the will to keep going when the world seemed set against you. That night, she returned to her quarters aboard her flagship, alone with her thoughts. She traced the contours of her armor with her fingers, remembering the council's cruel whispers and the hidden smirks of her rivals. She thought of Elias, standing calmly among his people, unbroken, unbowed. He had no throne, no empire, no legacy, guaranteed. And yet he carried himself with a power she had never seen in her own halls. The thought unsettled her. It was dangerous to admire a human, dangerous to learn from them. Her people would see it as weakness. Her rivals would exploit it, and yet she could not turn away. The next day, she requested a private meeting with Elias. Alone in the human command room, she asked questions she had never dared to voice before. "How do you survive against us?" she asked bluntly. "Your weapons are weak, your fleets are small, and yet you endure." Elias leaned against a table, arms crossed. "We survive because we have to. We survive because giving up is not an option, because hope is more important than strength." Velara frowned. "Hope? You speak as if it is a weapon." "It is a weapon," he said simply. "A weapon stronger than steel. It cannot be destroyed. It cannot be stolen. It grows in the hearts of those who refuse to give in." For a long time, Velara said nothing. She felt the truth of his words, deep in her bones. Her people measured power in blood, muscle, and conquest. Humans measured it in survival, in spirit. She realized then that her obsession with her infertility had blinded her. She had been searching for worth in her body, in her ability to produce heirs. She had never considered that worth could exist outside of legacy. Elias watched her silently, letting her thoughts unfold. And though he did not know it, he was teaching her a lesson older than any empire. Life was measured not by what you could create, but by what you refused to let die. By the end of the day, Velara had made a decision. She would continue her mission, to negotiate with humans, but she would do so with a new perspective. She would see their courage, their determination, and perhaps, in doing so, discover the strength she had believed lost forever. That night, she stood on the balcony of the human base, looking at the stars that stretched across the sky. Somewhere out there, her rivals were plotting. Somewhere out there, her empire expected her to fail. But she felt something inside that she had not felt in years. Not fear, not despair, but hope. A quiet, burning hope that perhaps she could be more than the whispers of her people, more than the judgment of her rivals. Perhaps she could learn from these fragile creatures who survived against all odds. And perhaps in learning from them, she could find a path forward that no one had imagined. And somewhere in that thought, deep in her chest, a small spark of resolve ignited. She would not bow, she would not break. She would discover a new kind of strength, one that might not be measured by bloodlines, but by courage, persistence, and the will to endure. The humans were teaching her what her empire never could, and she was ready to learn. The quiet tension that had hung over the human base for weeks finally broke. Scouts reported a Kargoth fleet approaching from the outer rim of Atlas. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched in every way. Still, they did not panic. Princess Velara stood on the observation deck of the flagship orbiting the moon. Her golden eyes scanned the fleet approaching in perfect formation. Each ship was larger, stronger, and far more advanced than the humans' defenses. Her generals muttered among themselves, ready to strike with fury. Yet Velara felt a strange hesitation. "They will not survive," General Krax growled, his tusks clenching. "Send the fleet, crush them." Velara's gaze did not leave the viewport. "Perhaps not," she said softly. "But they have survived so far against odds no one else could endure. There is something in them we do not understand." Krax barked a laugh, sharp and harsh. "You grow soft, princess. You cannot see weakness for what it is?" Velara remained silent. Deep inside, she remembered the humans' persistence, their courage, and the lessons Elias had taught her. They were fragile, yes, but they endured. And that endurance, she realized, was a kind of strength the Kargoth had never learned. Down. On the surface, Captain Elias Ward was already preparing his people. Soldiers moved with purpose, barricading tunnels, reinforcing walls, and checking weapons. Children were evacuated to hidden shelters, while adults stood ready at every post. They had no chance in open battle, yet they acted as if survival itself was a mission worth fighting for. Velara descended in a transport to meet Elias. She did not walk among her troops or issue orders to her generals. She needed to see the humans up close. Elias met her at the landing pad. His eyes were steady, but she could see the exhaustion beneath. "Princess," he said, "you should return to your fleet. This is not your fight." Velara shook her head. "It is my fight if it tests me," she replied. "I want to see what you are capable of." For the first time, Elias looked at her with something more than respect, something like understanding. "Then you will see," he said quietly, "that even the weakest can stand when the strong fall." The first strike came at dawn. Kargoth ships tore through the skies above Atlas, their plasma weapons scorching the barren landscape. Humans fired back with their rudimentary cannons, little more than light bursts against the Kargoth's shields. Many ships were destroyed, immediately, falling in fiery arcs that left trails of smoke across the sky. Yet the humans did not run. They did not panic. They adjusted their tactics, retreating into narrow valleys where the larger Kargoth ships could not follow. Small squads ambushed armored walkers using traps, rocks, and clever maneuvers to slow them down. Velara watched, fascinated. Every strategy, every improvisation revealed human ingenuity. They were weak, yes, but they were clever. They were unpredictable. They did not fight like a single controlled force. They fought like a swarm of deterred minds. The war had reached its peak. Atlas was scarred with craters, smoke rising from burned-out settlements, and the sky was streaked with fire. The Kargoth fleet loomed overhead, massive ships casting shadows like mountains. Yet, the humans refused to surrender. Their trenches held strong, their barricades stood firm, and their eyes still carried a quiet defiance. Princess Velara observed the battlefield from the flagship's deck. Her golden eyes scanned the chaos below, searching for the spark that kept the humans fighting. She saw Captain Elias Ward moving among his soldiers, organizing defenses and encouraging them despite exhaustion and fear. Her heart stirred. She had expected to see panic, despair, or collapse. Instead, she saw courage. Real courage. Not the raw, reckless bravery her people celebrated, but the kind that endured, the kind that persisted against overwhelming odds. A sudden alarm blared across the Kargoth ships. One of her generals shouted, "Princess, the humans have launched a strike team against our command outpost. They are small, but they are fast. They have captured critical supplies." Velara clenched her fists. The humans were daring the impossible. It was reckless, yes, but effective. Every move showed their unpredictability, their ingenuity, and their determination to survive. She remembered the gardens on Atlas, the young soldiers who rose after every fall, and the quiet but fierce way Elias had taught her what survival meant. "Let them fight," she said softly. "Sometimes strength is not in crushing your enemy, but in understanding them." General Krax gaped. "You would let them attack freely? Princess, this is madness." Velara ignored him. She had learned something vital. Humans did not rely on brute force. They relied on hope, and hope was far stronger than the Empire could ever anticipate. On the ground, the strike team moved with silent precision. They avoided patrols, neutralized machines, and carried essential supplies back to the trenches. Even wounded, they pressed on, refusing to be stopped. Elias led from the front, giving orders with calm authority, inspiring each human to fight harder. Suddenly, a Kargoth captain cornered him. The alien's massive hand reached for Elias, intending to crush him instantly. The humans nearby hesitated, but Elias stood tall, facing the giant with no weapon in hand. "Stand down," he said, quietly. "You can take me, but you cannot take what we fight for." The Kargoth hesitated. Elias moved with unexpected speed, dodging the blow and using the alien's weight against him. He pushed the Kargoth off balance, and the smaller human led the alien into a trap where other humans restrained him. Valara watched, amazed. Humans had no chance to overpower the Kargoth physically, yet they used strategy, teamwork, and courage to survive. Each action was small, but together they created victories that defied expectation. The battle raged for hours, yet the humans did not yield. Every time the Kargoth advanced, the humans adapted. Every time a weapon failed, they found another way. It was exhausting, dangerous, and seemingly impossible. But it worked. Valara's mind worked quickly. If the humans could endure like this, perhaps there was more she could learn from them. The Empire measured strength in power and dominance. Humans measured it in persistence, in the refusal to surrender. Her heart tightened as she realized how much she had judged her own worth by the wrong measure. She had believed that her infertility made her incomplete, that her inability to produce heirs defined her power. And yet here were humans, without armor, without royal bloodlines, without endless strength, teaching her the greatest lesson of all. She took a deep breath and made a decision. She would act. Not as a princess seeking glory or a throne, but as someone who had learned what courage and hope truly meant. Descending to the battlefield in her personal craft, she landed quietly behind the trenches. Soldiers froze, unsure what to expect. The humans looked up in shock and fear. Valara raised her hands, showing no weapon. "I am not here to fight you," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I am here because I have seen your strength. You endure where my people expected you to fall. You survive where others would surrender, and I will not let you be destroyed for it." Elias stepped forward, cautious but recognizing her authority. "Princess, if you are here, you will be marked as traitor by your empire." Valara nodded. "I am already judged. I have nothing to lose but what I thought defined me. Now I choose to protect what is truly strong." She turned to the soldiers around her. "These humans are not weak. They are survivors. Stand with them. Fight with them. Show the Empire that strength is not only measured in bloodlines or conquest. Show them that courage endures." Her words ignited a spark among the humans and even some Kargoth soldiers who had followed her silently. The fight shifted. Where there had been despair, there was hope. Where there had been fear, there was determination. By nightfall, the humans had held their positions. Small victories accumulated, and the Kargoth generals realized their mistake. They had underestimated humanity, and they had underestimated Valara's newfound resolve. Elias approached her after the battle, wiping soot from his face. "Princess, you've done what no one else could. You've given them hope, and that makes all the difference." Valara shook her head, a small smile on her lips. "No, Elias, you've given me hope, and I'm only beginning to understand what that means." The war was far from over, but the tide had shifted. The humans were no longer seen as weak, insignificant creatures. They were survivors, fighters, and teachers of a strength that the Kargoth had never known. And Valara, the princess who had long believed herself broken, finally realized her own power. Not in bloodlines, not in conquest, not in the judgment of others, but in the courage to stand, to fight, and to believe in something greater than herself. The turning point had come, and with it, a new chapter began, not only for the humans, but for the princess who had found hope where she least expected it. The battlefield was quiet now. Smoke rose in thin wisps, and the first light of dawn cast a soft glow across Atlas. The humans had survived the onslaught, and the Kargoth forces were regrouping, battered and wary. For the first time, the Empire realized that these fragile beings were far stronger than anyone had imagined. Princess Velara walked among the human soldiers. She had chosen to stand with them, and they accepted her presence with cautious respect. Captain Elias Ward approached her, his uniform dirt-stained but his posture steady. "You kept your word," he said quietly. "You protected us when it could have cost you everything." Velara nodded. "I did what I had to do. You showed me something my empire never could. What real strength is." Elias smiled faintly. "Then perhaps your people will finally understand it too." But Velara knew the truth. The Empire would never fully understand. The Kargoth measured worth in heirs, bloodlines, and dominance. Yet she had learned that strength could also be courage, ingenuity, and hope. That lesson was hers now, and she would carry it wherever she went. A council of Kargoth generals arrived soon after, their faces dark with anger. They expected scolding, perhaps even punishment. Instead, Velara stood tall before them, her golden eyes unflinching. "Your assumptions were wrong," she said. "Humans are not weak. They are survivors, and their courage has taught me a lesson that none of you could give." The generals exchanged glances. Some sneered, unwilling to accept her words. Others silently began to realize she spoke truth. Velara had changed. Her power was no longer measured by what she could produce. Her power was measured by what she had learned and how she chose to act. Meanwhile, Elias addressed his people. "We have endured," he said. "We have survived against the strongest in the galaxy. Our courage has proven that even the smallest, the weakest, can change the course of history. And we did not do it alone. We were joined by someone who saw us not as weak but as worth fighting for." The humans cheered, and Velara felt warmth she had never known. She had spent years feeling incomplete, believing that infertility defined her. Now she understood that worth was not given by birth, but earned through courage and the will to protect others. The Kargoth fleet withdrew slowly, their losses heavy and their pride wounded. Reports of human victories spread across the galaxy. Aliens who had once dismissed humanity began to take notice. The humans were no longer insignificant. They were respected. Velara returned to her throne on her homeworld, but she was not the same princess who had once sat alone in despair. She called a gathering of the Empire, summoning generals, diplomats, and advisors. "My people," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "We have learned a valuable lesson. Strength is not always in conquest nor in bloodlines. True strength is courage, persistence, and the willingness to endure when all seems lost. Humanity has shown us that. We should honor it, not destroy it." Murmurs filled the hall. Some were skeptical, some shocked, but many listened, quietly understanding the truth. Velara's words were not just advice. They were a new vision for the Empire. Outside the palace, humans and Kargoth alike worked together to rebuild Atlas. Where once there had been fear and hostility, now there was cooperation. Velara walked among them, helping with supplies, encouraging the young, and sharing stories of survival. She found Elias overseeing repairs to a water system that had been damaged in battle. "You've changed the Empire," he said, shaking, his head in disbelief. "I didn't think anyone could do that." Velara SD softly. "Not I alone. You and your people taught me why